Welcome to Slow and Steady, the podcast where you get to follow along as we build products in public. Each week, we'll give you an honest peek into our lives as we share our struggles, our wins, and everything in between. I'm Benedikt. Today is August 9th. This is episode number 103, and I'm excited to welcome a guest today. My guest today is Daniel Alm. He's a single founder and running Timing, one of the best time tracking tools for macOS. We've been friends for a couple of years, and I'm very excited to have him on today. Hi, Daniel.
Hi, Benedikt. Thank you for having me today.
Yeah, thanks for agreeing to come on. This was more of like a spontaneous idea that we came up over the weekend, I guess, because it turns out we have a little bit of a scheduling conflict with Brian traveling and Benedikt on vacation. So I was out of the blue, sitting here alone without anyone to record with, and we fixed that by having you on. So thanks for helping me out here.
You're welcome. Yeah, a few weeks ago, I thought about asking you guys whether you would like to have me as a guest anyway. And last week I asked you, so the timing was pretty much perfect there.
Yeah, we dodged the bullet there. So one thing I have to say right away is like this feels totally awkward, like having a conversation with you in English, because you're from Germany as well, and usually we talk in German, and this weirds me out a little bit right now. But we'll manage, I guess.
Yeah, I can relate to that, but I think our other guests, our other listeners would appreciate if we keep talking English.
I think so too. Yeah, I remember with my the previous podcast I did with Christoph, we would have the occasional English episode when we had guests on. But I feel like for this for this podcast, it's not an option to do the occasional.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
So we skip on that. So as most people probably don't know about you, can you tell a little bit about what you do and what timings, what the state of timings is these days, or actually timings is the competitor, right?
Yes, actually, timings is being developed by a friend of mine who recently shut it down, and now he's sending customers to me. So that's
Perfect.
Nice of him. I'm Daniel. I've been developing apps first for the iPhone and then later for the Mac ever since I studied. So since around 2009, first for the iPhone App Store and later for the iPhone and Mac. And in 2013, I joined Google and worked there for about 2.5 years. But at some point, I realized that I actually wanted to really try to do the bootstrapped founder journey full time. So I left Google in 2016 and spent about a year redeveloping my app completely from scratch, which took way longer than I expected and was a much larger risk than I expected. But luckily, when I launched the new version in 2017, the response has been very positive, and I've been continuing to develop Timing full-time ever since. And Timing itself is an automatic time tracking app for Mac. So that means that instead of manually starting and stopping timers, it will automatically track which app and which document and which website you use at any given time, so that you can later exactly see how you spend your time. You get a graphical overview of that, and you can also easily assign these times, for example, to tracked tasks, so that you can really bill your hours and get a good picture and good bills for your time. And we used to be only available for single users, for example, freelancers or productive professionals. And we've tried to expand that into teams recently with mixed success. Let's call it like that.
Yeah, let's talk about this in a couple of minutes. One thing I want to ask you, is Timing the only product you're working on these days, or are you still I remember couple of years ago you had 2 or 3 more, I remember a professional calculator thing. Are those still a thing, or did you stop doing those?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So technically my calculator app, which is called Pocket CAS, is still a thing. But these days it's pretty much just in maintenance mode. So it's still available on the iPhone and Mac App Store. and it still about pays for the rent of my office, but that's about it. And I invest a few hours per year to make it updated for the latest versions of iOS and macOS, but that's about it. So other than that, I'm focusing on timing full time. Back when I launched Timing 2, I also figured that I would switch to other projects and try to diversify over time, but the opposite has happened pretty much.
So timing basically takes up all the time.
Yes.
All the timings.
Yes, all the time there is, and then more. It would take more time if I had more time.
Are you still, like, you started this as a single founder? Are you still a one-person team, or has this expanded into a company with employees or contractors by now?
So last year, I actually converted my business from a sole proprietorship to a limited liability company, or the German equivalent of that. And we've grown the team last year to by adding another freelancer who is a friend of mine who helps me with developing on the Mac app. And this year, I also added another developer who helps me develop the web application, which is written in PHP. And I'm also, working with marketing consultants and designers as needed on a freelance basis. But that's about it in total. And there's always more stuff to do, but I also appreciate that there's only a limited amount of management work that I have to do at this team size.
So you're a company of 3 by now?
Yes.
That's still pretty cool. I in my mind, you were always still the solo developer, just like making a living with one Mac application. But that's, by now it's not even just a Mac application anymore. It's like you have this whole entire web component to it. And
yes,
is it available for iOS as well? I don't remember.
So the timing app itself is not available on iOS, not on the iOS App Store. Because also Apple wants to get a share of subscriptions that you offer and so on. But technically, most of my customers come to the app through the Mac app, which is not available on the App Store either. And I'm not quite sure how Apple would react to people first subscribing to the Mac app and then using the iOS app and so on. So that's something that I want to avoid touching. But the web app can actually be installed on your iPhone as a progressive web app. And I've taken some measures to make it as useful and accessible as possible in that state. So you can start and stop timers on the go, but it's technically not a native iPhone app. I've also been thinking of expanding to Windows, but that's quite a different architecture than how you develop for the Mac and for iOS, and I've never had the resources for that. So I guess with the 3-person team, you still have to be mindful about how you allocate time.
Yeah, very true. It sounds like with the recent addition of like the Teams feature, it sounds like Windows might be a requirement in the future.
Yes. So after I introduced the Teams feature, that I really noticed that it's not as easy as just adding user management and then viewing your users' times and then being done. So there's quite a lot more to it that I did not anticipate. And a big concern, for example, from prospects has been indeed being cross-platform. So iOS isn't a question these days, but a lot of teams, they're mixed between Windows users and Mac users. And if you can only serve the Mac part of that customer base, you're definitely at a disadvantage because, what should the Windows users do? And you don't want to have the time tracking data very accurately for half of your team. So I have to work on that.
Yeah, very true. Can you tell me a little bit about the origin story of the Teams feature in general? I mean, timing itself was pretty useful as like just a standalone tool for yourself that you could possibly even use in a team setting because it doesn't really matter. As long as you're tracking your own time, you can share it with the team, I guess. What made you decide to build this Teams feature and get started with that part?
Yeah, so I launched the version 2 of timing in 2017, and then every year after that, essentially, I launched like one big feature in addition to smaller feature updates. So in 2018, I added sync, which was quite complex as well. Then in 2019, I added the web app, and I remember how we met in person a few years ago, and I was already talking about the Teams feature, and I was always thinking like, how could I build this? But do I really want to build this because it's such a large feature? And in 2020, I was thinking about what next a big thing to work on. And I was trying to decide between Teams and integrations with other services. And then the COVID pandemic came around, and a lot of people worked from home and started working from home. And I figured that it would be great to help those people with their time management. So that was essentially what made the final decision for me in terms of whether to focus on Teams or integrations next. And that's what I then spent about half a year building.
So, and you launched it in January, I guess?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
How's the feedback been so far? Like, is it what people are looking for? Is like, did you get a lot of new sales? Any learnings from that?
Yeah, so we did have a couple of customers who were very happy and still are very happy that they can now use timing with their team. And those were especially like existing customers who had already been using timing. Some of them had been using it by themselves, and some even had been using it with the rest of their team, but without sharing data and without sharing projects, like just in an isolated fashion. And those people were very happy to have the Teams feature now. But I did notice that with new customers who come in, or who are like prospects who are looking at timing and who want to use adopt it for their team. For some of them, the functionality that we offer is sufficient, but when you start to look at larger teams, they actually need, for example, more reporting facilities and time budgets and these kind of things that we simply don't have yet. So now it's up to us to also work on those features to make timing more accessible and useful to these teams as well. But in general, I definitely also noticed that smaller teams, like freelancer agencies, so essentially an extension of a single freelancer to multiple people, those are much happier with using timing in the current form than, for example, larger teams or enterprise customers.
Mm-hmm. Did you it sounds like, well, the feature itself sounds like, well, not necessarily an easy feature to build, but like not a big change to the product. I feel like it suddenly changes, or it has to change or influence like your entire marketing strategy, because suddenly you're targeting a totally different audience in a way, right? Did you like, how did you plan for that, and what was the strategy there?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So, yeah, initially I was a bit like, I'll just build a Teams feature and then Teams will come and find it. And that was not as much the case as I expected, which kind of is to be expected in retrospect. And to be honest, I haven't been advertising the Teams feature that heavily. Also because there are a lot of things that we can add there that would be particularly useful for teams. And I feel like it makes more sense to add these things before really trying to go after a market that we can't serve perfectly right now. So there are a lot of things that we still can add to the Teams feature to make it more useful. And until then, it's more useful to those people who can already benefit from it, and hopefully getting there for other people. And I've also noticed, for example, that a lot of larger customers who come to us with their teams and try to investigate whether timing would be useful to them, they notice that it's actually not that easy to get your team to track time unless there's a really good reason to. So if you're a member of an agency, you know that if you don't track time, your boss doesn't get money from their customers, and then you can't get paid, which is a strong incentive to actually be diligent about tracking your time. But if you're just employed working in the team, and then somebody's asking you to track your time, that's a much harder sell towards the employee why they should now track their time. And we've also had concerns about, monitoring employees and team members. That the employees thought that their boss could see every single thing that they do, which is actually not the case. And there were quite a few technical challenges to prevent that from ever be possible. But yeah, it's hard to change people's perception on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. That's something I haven't really considered, but of course, it comes quite naturally to one as a freelancer to start tracking their time because there's money attached to it, more or less. But if your boss comes to you and asks you to track your time, I think, even my gut reaction would be like, no, I'm not entirely sure about that. Like, why is it suddenly so important?
Yes, exactly.
So interesting, yeah.
Yeah. So we do have a few technical measures to try reducing the impact of that. For example, at first, the Teams feature would only allow you to see the manual time entries of your team members. So nothing of the automatic time tracking would be visible to managers at all. So anything that would be visible would have been explicitly created by the team member. In addition, team members can have both personal and team projects, and the manager only ever gets to see things attached to the team project anyway. So anything that you want to keep personal, you can just move to a personal project, and it will stay private forever. We've since added support for showing app usage duration in the web app for managers, so that managers can see also how much time you spend in apps. But we do not provide managers with which apps you used or which documents or which websites. So all the manager sees is that you spent, like, let's say 3 hours in apps on project XYZ, but they don't get to see when exactly you worked and in which apps or documents or websites. We actually hired some lawyers to consult with us whether that would actually be possible, because total employee monitoring is actually illegal in Germany, and the limited fashion in which we introduced that is in conjunction with German and European law.
That's good, I guess. I mean, also something I haven't really considered, but you could sell this as a monitoring tool for your employees quite easily, I guess. Yeah,
there are actually tools that are optimized for that use case, where, for example, managers can even see screenshots of what their employees have been working on, and to all level of detail, and they can get alerts when somebody's not putting in 5 minutes too few and these kind of things. But that's something that timing has never been about, and it's a direction that we don't want to go either. Mm-hmm. So we're comfortable with possibly limiting the set of customers, but maintaining our customers' privacy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So looking at your website, I mean, I might just be blind, but you're not advertising the Teams feature at all right now, do you?
So technically, actually, I rebuilt that landing page last week, so I couldn't quite tell you whether it's on the landing page right now. It is mentioned briefly on the features page, but we're not strongly advertising that. I'm also still working with our marketing consultant on how we can best present that. But yeah, it's a bit of a chicken and egg problem. The features need to be there for the customers to come, but the customer also need to be there to warrant adding features. So in general, right now, we're trying to add features that can be useful to both groups, with the goal of being more and more useful to team users. So we do slightly prioritize the things that would also be beneficial for our team customers.
Mm-hmm. So do you get customers, new customers that sign up specifically because of the team members feature or the team feature? Or is it mostly upselling existing customers who grow out of their personal usage into a small agency or stuff like that?
We do have a few people who come to us and who want to try the Teams feature and to just sign up by themselves. And I've also had, just customers sign up for the Teams plan and then use everything by themselves. While others need a lot of nudging and, explaining how that works. So I guess I still have to have some simplification to do there. But then again, you also need to maintain privacy, which is not that easy. But in general, it's more of an upsell to people who are already familiar with timing as a product, who then also want to use it with their team.
Makes sense, yeah. Especially as you're not actively promoting it on the website yet.
Yes, we still have to work on that.
Actually, by now I found it. It's mentioned on there, but it's not very obvious, to be honest.
Yes.
So, given that you mentioned that you're not like that are a lot of things missing, but you're not getting like a lot of new customers for this. How are you figuring out what to focus on while working on this, like the Teams feature? Are you just like asking the magic hat and then pulling ideas out of it, or do you have a process of like figuring out what people need and what they are willing to pay for?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Luckily, timing is already profitable, so we are in the spot where we can just focus on what we think right now without, having our hair on fire or needing to chase the next bit of MRR. But in general, the Teams customers that we have, both in terms of prospects, but also those who actually became customers, they did have similar requests in many regards, for example, with regards to reporting or time budgets, so that they can see across employees like how much time was allocated towards a specific project and how much of the time has been used up already. And those are also things that can be useful to individuals as well. So things like that are an easy way to start improving support for Teams, for example.
So now that we established that you're basically not doing any marketing for the Teams aspect of the application, how do you approach marketing in general? Like you mentioned that you've been profitable, or that you are profitable. As I know, you've been profitable for quite a while. So are you doing any marketing at all, or is it just like word of mouth and just happens magically? Or what? Like, tell me a little bit about your marketing strategy these days.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So back in 2017, I did quite a few blog sponsorships, where you pay a more or less famous blogger in your niche to mention timing, of course, with attribution that this is sponsored. And back then, that actually did generate quite a few traffic, and the first few reviews of the new version of timing on Mac blogs also generated quite a few customers, for example. And of course, the backlink from the sponsorship is also nice in terms of SEO. But I've noticed that over time, the effectiveness of such sponsorships has been getting less and less. I think there are several factors to that. First of all, of course, you can't keep sponsoring the same blog over and over again and expect to get new customers. And there's only a limited number of Mac blogs, for example, that you can sponsor. And not all blogs accept sponsorships, for example. Like in the Mac scene, there are a few, but other than that, there are not that many blogs. And I haven't gotten into the guest posting space so much yet. I have been thinking of that, and I'm actually working with an agency called Audience Ops who do content marketing, and they've been creating 1 to 2 blog articles for us every month. And I'm thinking of combining that with an outreach agency in order to obtain guest post opportunities that Audience Ops could then work on for me. In addition, back in 2017, I also reinvested a lot of the profits from the new version into, for example, podcast advertising. But it turns out that is actually not that effective for a small app with a limited audience and also a limited customer lifetime value. Just to give you an example, if you're a mattress company, then almost everybody needs a new mattress eventually, and they're willing to pay several hundred euros or dollars for such a new mattress, which means that you can reach anyone on the podcast and you get a lot of money for each sale. But with an application that costs about like 100 euros per year, and that only, let's say, at most 5% of people would have a use for, it's much harder to make podcast advertisements work with that kind of business model. So I've been reducing that quite a bit. I'm still advertising a few podcasts, but in a limited fashion. And other than that, being around since 2011 and having good backlinks definitely helps for SEO, for example. So we're usually in one of the top spots if you search for Mac time tracker. And I also see a lot of customers coming from us through referrals. For example, the biggest search term how people actually find us is timing Mac or timing app, which for me is an indication that they actually, have heard about the app and are searching for it on Google after having heard about it somewhere else. And I'm actually trying to bank on that more with a new referral program that I've actually worked on last week. So now our customers can share a referral link with their friends, and when they do so, both they and their friend get 1 month free on their subscription. But that feature has just barely been finished, and it has not been marketed yet either.
Well, that sounds like a good idea, though. You mentioned mattresses and podcast promotion. I'm wondering, like, what podcasts did you advertise in? I feel like a product like yours would be a perfect fit for sponsorship on like freelancing related podcasts. Did that not work out as well, or are those the podcasts that you keep sponsoring? Or why do you feel like it's not working overall?
Yeah, there are actually not that many freelancing related podcasts that aren't, sponsored by their own company or by actually a time tracking application company, these kinds of things. But for example, I've been advertising on a podcast called Mac Power Users, which is, for people actually who want to use their Mac better. So there's been some overlap there. And there also used to be a podcast called Free Agents by two bloggers from the Mac scene who actually became free agents. Like they left their jobs to work on their own things, their own info products, for example, but also freelancing for other people. Which was a very good match, of course, in terms of audience. And that podcast at some point rebranded itself as Focused, about productivity and deep work and these kind of things, which is still actually a good overlap. So I've been keeping sponsoring that podcast for the past several years. And I also once mentioned or sponsored a podcast called Cortex, which is a fairly popular podcast, essentially two podcasters talking about their lives and productivity and tools and so on. And they actually now started using timing, or at least one of them, and mentioned it a few times, but I didn't really notice any uptake from that. So it's tough to really find the specific audience in a podcast that works for you, at least for me.
Yeah. So but it sounds like the more niche the podcast gets, and the more the overlap between your audience and like the podcast audience, the more
yes, definitely.
The chances of it working out are definitely higher. Whereas sponsoring,
yes,
your random true crime podcast is probably not a good idea.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, especially if you're bootstrapped, you can't just blanket the podcast space and hope that you'll get a return. The more focused and the more specific you are, the better. I've also been trying Google Ads again, but so far with limited success. Like in general, in my experience, paid ads convert less well than organic traffic. So especially, of course, with general traffic. I used to also try Facebook ads and LinkedIn ads and Twitter ads and Reddit ads and Quora ads, and none of those were profitable. And these days, I recently started trying Google ads again, with a bit of success, but it's still hard to make it work, because other people are bidding for the same keywords, and you don't get as many sales from ad traffic as from organic traffic in general.
Yeah, we've noticed that as well. You also mentioned audience ops, and I went to your website again and checked where's the blog, and I had to search for it a little bit. So you have a quite extensive list of posts on there. Do you see any positive effects on that, like in terms of traffic, or is it mostly an SEO play, just making sure that you rank well for like your main keywords like Mac time tracking or whatever?
Yeah, so some of these blogs did actually attract some traffic, but many don't attract that much traffic after they've been published, and I think also don't rank that well yet. I've been hoping to start reaching out to more people in order to get backlinks for these posts in the hopes of making them rank better. But it's also a bit, of just staying present in the minds of our customers and, demonstrating that we're still engaged and thinking about the space, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. To be honest, I've never noticed that you have that much blog posts out there.
Yeah, if you do it for a couple of years, it tends to accumulate. We do announce many of them on the newsletter, but we also try not to bother our customers too much, and not to spam them too much. And for example, similarly, we are in the process of removing tracking pixels and including Google Analytics from our website, because A, then you don't need a cookie banner on your website at all, and B, because it's actually the right thing. So in terms of time tracking companies, we are one of the more privacy focused ones, and it just better aligns with our values to not creepily track people all around the web.
Yeah, I can get behind that. Yeah. I still, you said that you're thinking about this, but I'd love to hear more about, at least in the future when you have some numbers, about the idea of using audience ops and an outreach service and generating guest posts based on that, because that honestly sounds like a really good idea. I haven't really considered it so far, but yeah, I mean, if that works, it might be a good source of, and a relatively cheap source of inbound links versus the cold outreach and getting people to link to your existing blog posts. I feel like pitching good blog posts to other websites that just happen to link back to you is much easier than getting them to edit some post they have or whatever, or add a link somewhere back to your blog. That always feels like a tough pitch.
Yes, definitely. So actually, there was a service called Posthaga, and they've been on Rob Walling's podcast recently, and that's how I heard about them. And they also have a done-for-you outreach service. Their main product is just software for outreach, but they also have the done-for-you service, and I'm thinking of signing up with them and just seeing how that works. What they told me so far sounded interesting, but let's see how well it works in practice as well. I'll keep you posted.
Yeah. I'd love to hear that. Yeah. I think we covered most of the things I wanted to know about, what you're up to with timing these days. Is there anything else you want to talk about? Anything exciting happening in timing's future or your future?
To be honest, there has been a bit of a shift in mindset for me recently. So instead of always chasing the next bit of growth, I've come to realize that having a profitable service in general already is a nice thing, and at least right now, timing is working well without always having to chase the next customer. I mean, I'm still of course very invested in the product. It's my baby and it's still my full-time occupation, but that means that I've started to do less support outside office hours, and in general try limiting the amount of time that I spend in the office, and and just in general to have some more some more time for the rest of my life. For example, if I've gotten a new office recently after having been in the home office for several years before that, and in general that has already helped me have better work-life balance. Just walking home for 20 minutes after work already helps with maintaining work-life balance, and just getting into a different state of mind when you come home.
Yeah.
But even after that, when I came home, after 6 p.m., I just didn't have the energy, for example, to get a workout in. And now just leaving work between 4:30 and 5 p.m., just that one more hour has already helped me to work out much more regularly. And I feel like, okay, I'm already making a good living. So at what point do I start to actually invest or return some of that money, or convert that some of that money into more time for myself and my girlfriend and my relationships, and actually spend more time on those things, because there's only so much that you can do with all the money.
Very true. Yeah, I feel like that's one of the traps I also have to be careful of like we start out like pursuing this like bootstrapper life, like being independent and stuff like that, to have more freedom and work less. But for some reason, if you're not super careful about it, doesn't end up that way, and you end up working way more, or at least as much, and stressing out about things. And
and
if you can afford it, to just like work less or like just enjoy life more, you should totally do that, I guess.
And I've also realized that the work that you do in the 9th hour of your workday just doesn't add as much marginal value as the first hour, in my experience. So essentially, if you cut that hour, you don't even notice that much, and you can still resume work on that on the next day. The work isn't going to run away from you. And also, by working just a little bit less, I actually feel more productive in the rest of the time that I do work. I mean, nothing of this is rocket science, and there are a lot of people that have written a lot of books about this. But there's a big difference, at least for me, between actually reading about this, but and also realizing it and implementing it for yourself.
Yeah. I think that's a good note to end it on. Like, work less, enjoy life more, and ultimately you will be more productive. So yeah, thanks for coming on, helping me out here, talking about timing a little bit. I feel like I took away a couple of ideas, especially the guest posting idea. I might have to talk to Jane about that. So thanks a lot. If people want to hear more about you, follow you on Twitter, where do they, find you around the internets?
You can find us at timingapp.com, and you can follow me on Twitter as Daniel_A_A. It's an old name that just I get stuck with.
Sure. Could be worse, I guess.
Yes.
Well, then, thanks for coming on, and see you soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Goodbye.